How do I know my preparation stops being productive and starts being a way to cope with the encroaching anxiety of an important event or performance? How do I keep from leaking energy between important tasks or periods of deep focus work? How should I think about incorporating artificial intelligence into my own personal pursuits of excellence? We are giving you answers, advice, and most importantly, tools you can use today for all those questions and more on today's episode. This is Excellence Actually. I'm one of your hosts, Clay Skipper, and I will be joined very shortly, as I always am, by Brad Stahlberg and Steve Magnus. Since launching Excellence Actually, we have had a bunch of people send in questions. Some of these have come in through the voicemail. Some have come in through email. Some have come in through the Growth Equation Academy. If you are interested in learning more about any of those three things, there will be more details in the show description. But for today's episode, we have handpicked a few of those questions that we thought were most relevant to the widest group of people. And we're going to give you the most effective, time-tested strategies we've come across to deal with things like preparation, how to know when you are over-preparing in sport and in life to deal with anxiety, and how to manage that anxiety, how to weigh the pros and cons of the type of efficiency that artificial intelligence can bring to your work, how to transition between work periods without losing steam, moving from one task to the other seamlessly without leaking energy, and turning down an overactive alarm or threat system when you just can't get your nervous system to downregulate, even using the strategies we talked about last week in the episode on restless exhaustion. So I think you'll find today's format different in a useful and fun way. So far, we spent most of our episodes going deep on one topic, and that's been great. But today, you're really going to get Steve, Brad, and myself in coach mode, giving you rapid fire action steps to overcome everyday obstacles that we all struggle with, including Steve, Brad, and me. So without any further ado, let's get into the questions. All right, here we go. Question one. You guys have mentioned that confidence comes from preparation. I find that one of my problems, however, is not a lack of preparation, but an inability to know when to stop. Sometimes I think I keep preparing past the point of what's necessary just because I'm nervous for the upcoming event. Do you have any tips on finding the line between productive preparation and preparation that is anxiety management? Brad, why don't you kick us off here?
It's a great question. I do have a couple of tools that I find really helpful in these sorts of situations. They fall under the same general umbrella, which is asking yourself or trying to figure out, are you doing whatever it is that you're doing because it's genuinely giving you a better chance or making you more prepared? Or are you doing it because you just feel like you need to be doing something, you need to be doing anything? So the telltale example actually comes from the craft that I know best, which is writing. And I view editing kind of like preparation in a sense, because the main event is someone reading your piece and you have a first draft, which is kind of like your first big workout. You sign up for the race and then you got to edit and edit and edit. And each time you're editing, you're getting the piece more fit, to use fitness terms. However, there comes a certain point where you're like, should I continue to edit this sentence, this paragraph? Should I continue to turn this word over and over again, or am I actually getting in my own way? And for me, that comes in editing when I'm making circular edits. So one day I change the sentence to be X, the next day I change it to Y, and then on day 3, it's back to X, and then it's back to Y, and I'm just going in circles. That's a really good sign that I'm no longer editing because this is getting better. I'm just editing because of my anxiety that it might not be ready, it might not be good enough. I think the metaphor in sport or something like public speaking or music or really any other practice is you can ask yourself, does this workout or does this practice session have a purpose beyond trying to assure myself that I'm ready? Am I going to get more fit from this? Am I going to have time to adapt before the race? Is this practice session actually working on a piece of the song that I've not yet worked on or that I don't feel like is good enough? Or am I just doing this because sitting with the open space of having the performance in front of me is too much to handle? And sometimes you do it anyways, right? Because sometimes just sitting around and being anxious doesn't make sense. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to get in your own way. You don't want the edits to start making the piece worse. You don't want to leave your race in a workout that you shouldn't have done. And you don't want to burn yourself out practicing for the big performance when you need to save that energy for a week from now when you're actually on stage in front of a crowd.
This all is very true, and I would echo it. but it's really freaking hard to do when you're in that moment when you're like, I'm going to get that extra workout in. I'm going to keep working on this paragraph. And the reason behind that is like you are pushed when there's uncertainty. We want to close that gap. And what's the best way to close that gap? Doing something. So here, I think a lot of the work that works best here for this problem is on the front end, which is two things. First, before you get into this space, before you're a week out from the race, before you're in final edits, you define the preparation that you need to do. What are the constraints around that? How many workouts a week do you need to do in that taper week? What does that look like? How much are you dropping your mileage? You do that months out so that when you're an idiot during taper mode, you don't panic, you go back to the plan. And that keeps you centered. And the other part that I think really helps is get a coach or an outside voice. I'm going to be honest. My job when I'm coaching elite athletes is simply to prevent them from doing stupid things. One of the stupid things they do, too much work when they should be resting, or that panic to prove yourself in a workout that you're fit instead of trusting your fitness. When you have a coach or an outside voice or a mentor or someone just to give you perspective, that voice allows you to say, okay, yeah, I know you want to prove yourself in this workout, but don't go faster than 5 minutes for a mile for this rep. Don't do any more than 3 miles instead of trying to force out another mile or two. That outside voice gives you that perspective from keeping you from doing dumb things.
Those are great insights in terms of identifying where that line is between productive preparation and anxiety management. I think the only thing I would add here is maybe a few tools that have helped me sit with the anxiety, because that's the last step of this, right? You can identify that you've gotten to the point where you're trying to manage your anxiety rather than doing preparation that's productive. But then how do you actually let that anxiety be there such that you don't end up doing another workout or don't keep preparing beyond what you need to do? Two things that have helped me is, one, just reminding myself that the anxiety is probably never going to go away. And in fact, it going away completely would not help me learn how to be with it. Like there's an element of wanting a small smidge of that anxiety to be there, because then when you get up to do the thing, whether that's the workout or, I've given a lot of speeches at weddings and I've had a lot of anxiety about that, actually facing that anxiety and then doing the speech in the face of that and coming out the other side and seeing that it didn't, kill you, not to be dramatic, but to see that you survived it and you didn't fold and you didn't completely crumble. And maybe you did have some slip ups, but you got past them. Like, that allows you to work with that anxiety in such a way that it makes it less scary next time. And then the other one that takes some of the sting out for me that I heard someone say once, and I'm sorry because I cannot remember who it was, so I can't properly attribute it, but it's this idea that like you're either winning or you're learning. So even if you go into this presentation or this workout or this big event, this musical performance, as long as the stakes aren't like actual life or death and you completely bomb, you're going to learn something from that, right? That's going to give you a lesson that you can then use to continue your growth forward. Again, it doesn't make the anxiety go away, but it helps me a little bit be like, okay, worst case scenario here is that I completely crash out, but then I'm going to learn something and I'm going to get a little bit better. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we're all shooting for.
A mantra that can help is I'm as ready as I'm going to be. Because you could always do more, but it doesn't mean that more is better, as we discussed. Sometimes more means you're actually getting in the way. So if you reach that point and you kind of know deep down inside you're making your circular edits or you're doing the workout just to assuage the anxiety, just try telling yourself, like, I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
Question number 2. You've talked about the importance of doing deep focus work, a strategy that I've found helpful and useful. I often find, though, that one of my unhelpful habits comes after the deep work period, when I'm depleted of energy and my defenses are down. Those are the moments when distraction can kick in. I can find myself mindlessly scrolling or otherwise leaking energy. Any advice on how to be a bit more intentional during those transition periods when your energy is low and your guard is down?
So I think that the best example of this is a term that was coined by the psychologists Paul Bloom and David Pizarro, and they called it shitty flow. And shitty flow is essentially what happens during these transition moments when you pick up your phone and you start scrolling, or you go on a message board and it's been 30 minutes and you kind of have all the elements of flow. So you lose a sense of yourself, you lose a sense of time and space, But at the end of the 30 minutes, instead of feeling really nourished and fulfilled, you feel like crap because you got caught in shitty flow. And I think what ends up happening for so many of us is during these transitions, we get caught up in these kind of shitty flow experiences. How to avoid them and do something more nourishing, whether it's actual flow or even just a better break, is I think that it comes down to just designing your environment, as we've talked about in prior episodes, in a way to make that conducive. So if you have a 15-minute break and your natural inclination is to reach for your phone and start scrolling, can you just leave your phone at your desk and go for a walk? If that's too tall of an order, can you pop on some music that you like and listen to that music? So you still get your phone in your pocket, but at least you're listening to music. And then I also think having some like ritual and routine around transitions from different parts of the day. So from the getting ready for work to actually going to work, from lunch to coming back to work, maybe at the end of the day. If you ritualize those, then it's less likely that shitty flow is going to encroach on those small moments of time in those transition periods, and then you don't get warped in. So what are some examples of ritualizing that? Maybe at the end of the day, you have like a little wooden box that you put your phone and your computer in. In anything that you have that's kind of lingering on your mind, you jot down on a notebook, and then you also leave the notebook in the box, and then you step into another room. But the point is you have something to signify this is a transition and to help change your environment to facilitate that transition. Instead of carrying your phone, your notebook, and your computer into the kitchen with you, in which case you haven't really ended your workday. Now you're just potentially bringing all that cognitive load into the kitchen.
Yeah, this often occurs because all of our focus and energy is on the deep work. And that's what gets us excited. We're not thinking about what comes afterwards. We're thinking about, oh, I've got an hour and a half, maybe without kids or without interruptions, where I just get to like go deep on this topic that I really want to research or write about or think about or get some productivity done here. The way I like to think of it, similar to Brad, is that if I was an athlete, what do I do? Yeah, the main session, the main workout, the intervals, the hard part, it's what I'm focused on. But I know I'm not going from rep 10 of my 400-meter repeats to walking and getting in the car and driving home. What am I doing? I'm doing a cool down. And that cool down is ritualized. I have, a short jog to kind of decompress and bring my heart rate back down. Then I maybe hydrate and get some protein and carbs to refuel. And I sometimes socialize with my friends if you're part of a team. And then only then do you drive home or go sit on the couch or hop on your phone or what have you. And the point is that is thought through. It's automatic. It's what you do every single time. And I think when it comes to our deep work, what I'd ask you or challenge you to do is say, what is your cool down activity? Is it going for a walk afterwards to maybe just kind of decompress and process the deep work that you did or take the edge off? Is it maybe being online or reading something, but having a time component on that? I'm not going to go jog a 10-mile cool down. It's a 1 or 2 mile cool down. There's a into it. And having some sort of ritual around that helps because when we automate it, we don't have to pull into that willpower, which is already running low.
I think a metaphor that makes Steve's point like super salient for me is finishing deep work and being depleted and then having your phone with all these enticing apps in front of you is kind of like being starving and going through a McDonald's drive-thru. It's like, of course, you're going to order the double Whopper with cheese, a fry, and a supersized drink and a side of onion rings. What's the best advice is you don't go through the drive-thru when you're starving. Like you put an apple in your face instead, and you start there. And it never occurred to me that that's what we're doing when we're so depleted. And the first thing that we do is pull out a shitty flow device. It's no different than pulling out shitty food when you're starving that is designed to just have you immediately dive in without thinking, feel great while you're eating it, and then crappy after. And once you're in the drive-thru line and you're starving, you're screwed. So you've got to find a different route to drive so that you're not in the drive-thru line.
Yeah, I like keeping a stack of books nearby is like a version of having an apple, rather than the Big Mac. Let me just say that I struggle with this mightily. I mean, I find myself after I'll feel so good about getting a deep work period done. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, how did I end up on Instagram? How did this happen? And so for the person who asked this question, I hear you, I feel you, I get it. One thing that I have found helpful, there was a quote from Jerry Seinfeld, the comic, that he shared on Tim Ferriss a while back. And I loved it. So, and it changed sort of how I think about this. He said, "You've got to treat your brain like a dog. The mind is infinite in wisdom. The brain is a stupid little dog that is easily trained. Do not confuse the mind with the brain. The brain is so easy to master. You just have to confine it." I don't completely agree with that. I don't think it's easy to master, and that's a little more combative than I would characterize it. But here's what I have found helpful, and it's repeating what Steve and Brad have said, but it's just a technique that I've used. I try to, and I fail to do this often, but on days where I find that I'm sort of most intentional, I've written down everything I need to do. My to-do list is sort of time blocked out. And I write in there the things I want to do in the transitional period. So I'll write, like I look at what I have today and it literally says, eat breakfast, do dishes. I was away this weekend. So I have unpack bag. And it's literally just so I can treat my bank a puppy because I know, okay, it says work on Substack posts for an hour and a half. That I know I can get in, I'm going to lock into it. But the problem is when it's over. So if I can just take my sort of willpower out of it and have this list that says wash the dishes, it's like, okay, great, I'm doing that. And then my next task is on there. And again, something like washing dishes, going for a walk, reading a book, those are things that I find more restorative than being on Instagram or whatnot. But just the act of writing them down and having them there so you don't have to make the decision. You take out the what should I do and you just look at your list and you do it. I've found that very helpful. It doesn't work all the time. I don't get to do it every day. I still fail a lot. But that is one technique that I have found most helpful in doing this. And then the other thing I would say is to sort of get at one of the premises on which the question is based. If you can cut yourself off before you get to your point of depletion, then you have a little more energy to navigate the transitions, right? So if you are working for 2.5 hours, and when you finish this deep work, you're completely exhausted, can you dial that back to maybe an hour 45, maybe 90 minutes, so that when you get to the transitional period, you're not so zonked that you're walking through this drive-through like a zombie and you have no willpower left? Can you save that 10% and then spin that forward into the transitional period and the next deep work period so that you're not going to that sort of empty gas tank red zone?
The key here is you have a toddler who you go play with during breaks. And if you get on your phone, they'll just repeat daddy 25 times until you put it down. It's the solution.
Oh, you know what's worse than them repeating daddy 25 times, Steve, is them asking if they can like the post. That's when you know that you're setting a really bad example for your kids.
And this just goes to show to the listeners that we all struggle with this too. So we are out here in the stadium, on the field, navigating the same difficulty that you
it's so freaking hard. And this is like where self-kindness comes in. For the longest time, we talk about how we live in an obesogenic environment, which simply means the entire environment around us is set up to make people overweight and obese, regardless of one's willpower, regardless of one's genetics. The environment is rigged against us. And increasingly, the same thing is happening with our minds and our intention. We live in an environment that is designed to feed us junk content, that makes junk content easier to approach, cheaper than more nourishing content in the default option. And while we could wish that there would be some magical policy that's going to save us all, looking at governments in America, at least, I can't speak for the rest of the Western world, I don't think we're anywhere near that. And it sucks, but it's the situation, which means that we've got to do everything we can to take individual agency for ourselves and the people that we care about to become really aware of our attentional health, just like we are of our physical health.
Very well said. Okay, question number 3. In your episode on discomfort, you use the metaphor of treating difficulty like an alarm that we need to interpret to figure out if we can turn it down through problem-solving techniques or whether you just have to bear it and get on with our work anyway by using acceptance tools. But to extend that metaphor, there's also the possibility of alarm fatigue, where there's just too many alerts going off too much of the time because the threshold for them is low. Maybe there's a finicky sensor, something gets triggered a little too easily. Any advice on what to do in that case where the alarms are just going off too often and too much?
I think here you have to address the problem by why is the sensor finicky and why is the alarm going off too much? which is at the heart of resilience. Like if I was to simplify resilience, what is it? It's training your brain to realize, is this a fake alarm or is this something that I really need to pay attention to? And increasing that threshold. To use the athletic metaphor, it's when you're out of shape and you go for that first hard workout in a long time, your brain is screaming at you like, stop, you're going to die. Look how hard you're breathing. And you're like, dude, I'm just going for a jog down the street. I'm going to be okay. Okay. How do we increase that sensitivity? You show your brain and prove to it, we're not going to die. We're going to be okay. And I think that occurs with everything else that we're doing. The other things that I think really matter here is that often in our modern world, we have all these alarms going off and we get this alarm fatigue because of the environment around us. Brad talked about the, obesogenic environment and attention. It's the same with the alarms. So if our neighborhood app is telling us that, the guy down the street got his dog stolen or something or other, our brain goes, hey, this is a dangerous place to be. I'm going to be on high alert. If you're watching too much news that always goes with it bleeds, it leads, then your brain is going to go, hey, I'm updating my prediction that lots of bad things are happening around me because that's the information I'm getting. So alarm goes through the roof. Look at the environment you're around. From social media to what you consume, to what you read, to what you discuss and talk about, if it's all negative crap, then your brain is smart. It's going to be, we need to be on high alert. So we need to turn that down by not consuming that stuff, by consuming more depth, some longer view stuff, looking at history instead of always in the present, changing the information flow so your brain doesn't always predict danger and threat is a large part of this. And the last part I'll add here is you can also give it signs of security that will turn that alarm threat down. So we talk a lot, and we already did, about belonging. Guess what? If we have people around us, even when we're handling difficult things, we're able to, that alarm gets turned down a little bit, even if it's an actual danger, because our brain looks around and says, hey, I'm not on the savannah alone facing the lion. I've got, 25 of my tribe mates here. So chances are we'll figure it out and I won't die. Maybe someone else does, but I won't die. So our alarm gets turned down a little bit. So think about, how are you sending signals that I'm not in this alone? I've got other people to depend on. I've got other people who can help me. I'm in a secure environment. If you do that, you're going to be able to handle those moments much better, and you won't get that alarm fatigue.
Who knew Steve was so cutthroat of the savannah? I won't die, but someone else might get eaten.
That's because I can run faster than all of you people. So I'm going to be gone. And, Brad's going to be back there being like, I can lift heavy objects, but it won't matter because the lion will run you down.
Well, okay. I don't know where to start. I can't fight the lion. I guess I know how much Steve cares about me. I'm just food. The only thing that I'd add is common response to this is, are you telling me that I should bury my head in the sand and check out amidst a lot of truly bad news that maybe I need to be informed by? Here, the first thing I would tell you is no, that's not what we're saying at all. The second thing that I would say is to ask yourself, are you following news because you've become addicted to the anxiety and excitement that you get from following news? Or are you following news in a way that what you read or hear will actually change your behavior? And I think that for most people, myself included at times, we get caught up in the former and we convince ourselves it's the latter. So I go to NewYorkTimes.com 4 times a day, or I get the news alerts, or I go to CNN.com, or I make sure to read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times every day because I need to stay informed. I need to be an informed citizen. You can be an informed citizen on a lot less attention economy blaring alarms than that. You could probably watch PBS NewsHour if it's not defunded. Again, these are interesting times that we're living in with some real problems, once a day and know what you need to know. You could probably get the Sunday version of a national newspaper and sit down and read the hard copy version every Sunday and know what you need to know. Now, there are exceptions. If you want to run for political office and your job is being highly versed on everything that's happening all the time, then yes, you need to read. If your passion in life, if your primary focus is on advocacy, then yeah, you probably need to have a pulse on that specific issue. But you can be a really good informed citizen and stand up for what you believe in without needing to have your alarm so finely tuned because you're just constantly consuming news, which we know has a negativity bias all the time. I think a really tactical thing here is consume the newspaper once a week. Treat yourself to the Sunday New York Times or the Sunday Wall Street Journal or The Economist or whatever it is, and read that bad boy front to back. And if you learn something that might change how you vote, how you spend your money, might change how you think about taking care of your family, then absolutely engage in that behavior. But you don't get that from going and looking at news headlines twice a day and just seeing what terrible things are happening in the world.
Yeah, my answer is related, or what I would add is related to that, which is sort of, and it relates also to what Steve was saying, which I would say like sort of do an alarm audit. And what I mean by that is like I sometimes have alarms going off that are not real alarms. Like to give you an example, I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. I did this as a way to try to get off of Twitter, but still curate a way to stay informed. But I've created this other problem, which is now every time I log into my inbox, I have so many newsletters that I'm completely overwhelmed. And I have this sense of like, I'm never going to get through all these. And so each time I go into my inbox, I'm a little like, I can't keep up. But if I can get a little bit outside of that reaction, I realize this is an alarm that doesn't matter. Like, I don't need to read all my newsletters. Having that conversation with myself and being like, this alarm is going off, but it's not necessarily one you need to like, it's not a real one, just kind of cuts through it in a way that's nice. The other thing I'll say is that sometimes I think trying to solve the alarm problem or turn them down can become another way of setting off another alarm. And sometimes what you just need is a hard reset. And that could be just going for a walk for 30 minutes. It might just be, if it's the end of the day, like I even if it feels really hard to turn off, we just did an episode about how to do this on restless exhaustion, but just being like, I'm just going to get a good night's sleep. Because if I come back to this in the morning with hopefully 8, but even 7 or 6 hours of rest, you're probably going to feel a little bit more equipped to handle it. And so sometimes those alarms, they keep going off. It's chronic. That's chronic stress, right? And that's not something we're going to solve for you right here. That's probably you need to do some more 60,000 foot high level stuff. But sometimes you do just need a good night's sleep or a good meal or to go away for a few minutes and come back to it.
Last tool here, because a part of excellence is also not being a perfectionist and not becoming neurotic. Have a couple guilty pleasures that help dull the alarm, especially during those transition times, like before sleep. So have a beach read that is just easy for you to get lost in. Maybe it's not making you a better person. It's not making you a better writer. It's just a page turner, but you get lost in it. Have a TV show that you love, that you just get completely absorbed by. You got to make sure that you don't stay up binge watching it all night, every night. But I'll tell you what, a huge part of my shutdown routine with my wife after a long, stressful day of work and kids and news alerts and all the things that raise the alarm, we tend to have a show that we watch every night. I'm not sitting there reading Shakespeare before bed. I'm partially zoning out, partially engaged in a show. Why? Because that takes the alarm and it turns it down. So find the guilty pleasure in your life that helps you turn the alarm down, and don't even consider it a guilty pleasure. Consider it, again, part of that transition out of stress and into rest.
Much of the conversation around AI is about how much more efficient it makes us. It seems to me that efficiency and excellence are often at odds with one another. How do you guys think about balancing efficiency and excellence?
We have been discussing doing an episode dedicated to like artificial intelligence and excellence, and that's on our queue. So we plan on addressing this in more detail later. But for now, essentially what I would say is the work core to your craft, into what you want to do and who you want to become? And if it is, then it's probably not work that is worth having artificial intelligence do. If the work gets in the way of spending time and energy on the things that are core to your craft, then that's a great example of something to outsource to AI if it can do it. So the prime example for me would be if there was an AI that could respond, that could go through my inbox, figure out what emails are important and aren't, and respond to all the non-important emails, that would be an artificial intelligence that I would have no problem hitting go on and letting it run. If there was an artificial intelligence that could manage my entire calendar for me, and some of these exist, they're built into scheduling apps, right? Even like Calendly, you could say is kind of artificial intelligence. Of course, I'm going to use that instead of go back and forth in scheduling. But if there's an artificial intelligence that tells me it's going to write for me, I'm not going to go there because that's core to my craft. That's core to the person that I want to become. I think there are edge cases. And the prime example here is if there is a word that traditionally I would go to the Roget's thesaurus and spend like 10 minutes actually in the hard copy 1,500-page thesaurus looking up. Do I do that? Or do I put the word into AI and say, hey, artificial intelligence, here's the word, here's the context in which I'm using it. Give me a list of 30 other words that could work here. And that's one that I'm still working through. Sometimes I use AI, sometimes I use the thesaurus. Generally, it's just based on how rushed I feel or how much time I feel like I have at that moment. But there's a very real trade-off because I think that when I go through the thesaurus and I have the tactile experience of finding the word and flipping through the pages, I remember that. And in the future, I'm not going to need the thesaurus as much. Now I have another word, another tool in my toolkit versus when I have AI just dump me 30 words. I feel like I might get the same word, but I'm less likely to have that ingrained as an option for future times I write. And I think it's just being aware of those trade-offs and knowing where the edge cases are for your craft. But the litmus test to me is this core to the skill you want to develop and who you want to become? Or is this something that actually gets in the way of spending the time and energy on who and what you want to become?
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree. My advice on this is keep the main thing the main thing. So the main thing should be you. But in that, there's all sorts of use cases where AI can take care of the bullshit work, we'll call it, that kind of contributes, kind of complements that you kind of have to do, but you can outsource it so you can spend more time on the depth and deep work that you want to. A couple examples on this. So for making YouTube videos, the reason I started YouTube was, hey, I've got this depth of knowledge on running and performance. I'm just going to share it. And I want to sit down in front of a camera and share it and share the knowledge. The reason I hadn't done that in the past is because it takes a whole hell of a lot of work to edit video, audio, get fancy graphics and add them in. If you can use AI for the extra stuff, great. For the editing, to make the audio sound great, to make some cool graphics that go along with it and some transitions, awesome. Like, use that. Similarly, in writing, like, I'm not going to have AI write a book for me or anything like that. But if I can plug all of the notes from books that I've read or all the notes that I've taken from articles that I've already read, from research articles, and throw it into AI so that I can have a conversation almost like a trained research assistant, then yeah, I'm going to use that because that helps me do the main thing better. It's not writing for me. It's saying, hey, I remember reading this, pull this up, like pull off any research that I've highlighted that applies to X, Y, and Z. And what that does is it essentially, again, gives you your own kind of research assistant that allows you to focus on the main craft and do that better. So everyone's kind of lines are going to differ here. But similar to what Brad said, if it's a core part of who you are and what you're trying to do, don't hand it over to AI. But there's a lot of things where it can complement and make your life easier so that you can do the hard work necessary to learn, grow, and do the things that you love.
And this technology is so in its infancy. So don't hold us to anything that we just said, and don't hold yourself to any decision that you make right now, because we're in the first 0.01% of this technology's life. And there are some really smart thinkers that think it's not going to get exponentially better. And we're actually looking at an AI that might be as good as it's going to get for the next 100 years. And there are other really smart thinkers that think within 2 years, it's going to be 5 times as good as it is now. And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But I just think it's continuing to evaluate, am I using this tool or is this tool using me? And if I'm becoming more efficient, am I becoming more fulfilled? Am I getting that sense of concrete mastery? And if I am, then of course you want to use the tool if it's going to help you get it. But if you're just getting efficient and your metrics are all going up, but you don't have the internal satisfaction of mastery or excellence, then it's maybe a trade-off that you don't want to make.
Cal Newport, great friend of the pod, once gave me a great definition for efficiency. He basically is making the point that like efficiency just means faster, and efficiency and being faster is not always a good thing. What he said was efficiency devoid of a particular objective is a metric adrift. That goes back to exactly what you guys are saying. What is the objective here? Sometimes efficiency is going to help for that. Sometimes it's not. And Cal made an interesting distinction between efficiency and optimization. He was saying optimization is about what combination of things can I use to help me perform whatever objective I'm trying to perform the best. And sometimes AI might be a tool that will help you be efficient at certain parts of that, but you're going to probably have to combine it with other things that are not about efficiency. And so, yeah, just echoing Steve and Brad, it's about figuring out what is the thing I'm trying to do here and where are spots where efficiency matters and can be helpful, and where is efficiency just speeding things up for speeding things up's sake, but not actually getting me closer to what I want or developing any skills. That is a wrap for today. I don't know about you all, but a core memory for me from growing up is teachers telling us not to be afraid to ask questions, because if we had a question, probably someone else in the class had the same exact question. I'm going to use that same logic here to ask you, as we always do, to share this episode with someone or a few someones you think might benefit from hearing it, from hearing the tools and tips in here. Certainly, you know someone who is maybe an over-preparer or struggles with anxiety. Or maybe you just found the conversation on leaking energy and how not to do that resonant, and you think one of your friends, family members, mortal enemies, doesn't matter who it is, might find it useful as well. Please, please, please send it along to them. We ask this every episode because, yes, we think it's obviously the best way to grow this podcast, which we care about, and grow our community, but also because we want to get the tools out to more people in the hopes we can help them. We'll be back next week with another episode. Take care of yourselves, and as always, be excellent to each other.